Welcome to the May 23rd, 2019 meeting of the Town of Sherborn Select Board. I'd ask David Williams, the Town Administrator, to read the agenda with any proposed changes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, reorganization of the Select Board, and then the consideration of consent agenda with a payroll warrant, a one-day liquor license, and possibly setting the next meeting dates of June 6th and June 20th, which is the first and third Thursdays. And the next item is Sue Tyler, Cemetery Commissioner, with an update on the cemetery drainage project, and consideration of soil testing at Jamison Fields, with a request of the Planning Board, and John Higley will be here. Then open session ratification of Chief Richard Thompson employment agreement effective 7/1/19 through June 30th, 2022, as signed in executive session on May 9th, 2019. Then under routine business, Finance Director report, and we want to amend the agenda to remove request for a reserve fund transfer. Just take that out for now. And then the next item, Town Administrator report, update on Sustainability Coordinator, and Selectmen reports. Under executive session, it's MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the town, and the chair so declares. Library.
Terrific. Any proposed amendments? If not, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Terrific. We have one public comment. Carol Marple.
Oh my, well, I'm under severe restraint here, not touching any buttons.
You can push them, just don't touch them.
So I'm Carol Marple, the Sherborn Town Clerk, and I come before you this evening not just, but to say thank you to a number of people and groups who make elections possible in this town. And I would start with the gentlemen of Community Maintenance and Development. Long may their name reign. soon to be DPW, but they set up the polling place for me for every election. They take it down the day after the election. They are unfailingly cheerful and affable and efficient, and they come in like a little swarm of bees, and they get it done, and they smile and joke, and they're gone. So I thank them publicly, please. And next, I would like to thank our election workers, many of whom are volunteers, and they do their best to be efficient and affable and precise, and they do a good job. And last but not least, I would like to thank the staff in the town clerk's office. They put in yeoman's work on elections. It takes many, many hours, much more time than people would imagine. And Jackie and Tony are just amazing. So I say thank you to all of them.
Perfect. Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol.
Perfect. The first item on the agenda is the reorganization of the Select Board. We need to elect a chair, a vice chair, and a clerk. Nominations may be made, no seconds are required, and members may nominate themselves. I'll use my prerogative as chair to make an opening comment, which is, I think the idea of rotating the chairmanship is a good idea. One of the rationales for a 5-member board is to have differing skill sets and levels of experience. I've thoroughly enjoyed and valued the honor of being the chair, but the workload for the chair is greater than the non-chairs, as Paul knows better than any of us here. And based on the fact that my company is likely to be in M&A discussions this next year, this is not a good year for me to have non-work additional hours available. So I would nominate George Morrill to be the chair of the board.
Second.
Are there any other nominations? Any discussions?
Oh, I think it'd be great. He's already chaired advisory when I was on advisory, so
I'm happy to do it.
that's his first gig.
Terrific. We don't need a roll call vote, do we, David?
No.
Just a hand vote. All in favor of the nomination of George Morrill to be the chair? Passes unanimously. I will pass the gavel to you for the balance of the meeting.
Thank you. I'd like to make a nomination for vice chair of Chuck Young.
Second.
Perfect. I'd be happy to serve in that role.
Great backup, no question about it.
Better backup than lead.
All right, all those in favor? Do I have any other nominations? All right, if not, all those in favor? All right. I'll make a final nomination of Eric Johnson for clerk.
Second.
Any other nominations? All those in favor? Great. All right, so we'll move on to the consideration of the consent agenda. We have a payroll warrant, a one-day liquor license, and the possible next meeting dates of June 6th and June 20th. Does anyone have anything they'd like to remove from the consent agenda before I take a motion to approve?
No, I may be late on June 6th. I've got a board meeting. It's likely, typically runs late, so.
That's also the night of graduation. I know. I think you're speaking,
Yeah, I
Eric,
said it before.
which is last year when I spoke, I was here I got back here for most of the meeting.
Oh, okay.
With the 7 o'clock start, it seems to be time to do that and then also come back. So
We could delay the start to 7:30, if that would accommodate both members.
I don't know enough, frankly, about the timing of the graduation, but
I'm okay with that.
Yeah, that was 7:30 would.
7:30.
That works.
That's a great idea.
in fact, as the days get longer, it might be nice.
That'd probably be good. So that'll give Eric a chance to get back here. 7:30 on that. So I guess we'll remove the meeting date. So I'll take a motion to approve the payroll warrant and the one-day liquor license.
So move.
Have a second.
Second?
All those in favor? All right, and then for the possible next meeting dates, we have June 6th at 7:30, and then June 20th back to 7 o'clock.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay.
All those in favor? Next on the agenda, we have Susie Tyler. It's going to give us an update from the Cemetery Commission on the cemetery drainage project. And she has her computer working perfectly, so don't touch any buttons unless you're Susie.
I do not do trackpads and I do not do Windows. Hello all, Susan Tyler on the Cemetery Commission. I'd like to recognize Chucky Blaney, the chairperson of the Cemetery Commission, in the audience. I sent a letter to all of you on the board, and I would like to read it for those at home when they can hear, and for those here. So I wrote this the other day. There is one or two little changes since we've had some more work done. The Cemetery Commission started, can you hear me? I'm sure everybody can.
Yeah, move the microphone a little closer.
The Cemetery Commission started work on this project in 2016. As we reported then, it had been many years since the roads had been repaired and the rainwater runoff had never been fully addressed in all areas. In 2016, we received funding for a topographical survey and an engineering design to improve the cemetery for those that are there, for those that visit, and for the future. In 2017, we received funding to proceed with the project. After some final design changes and the creation of a request for a proposal, the project went out to bid and a construction company was hired. Work began in October of 2018, with the work to be completed by July of this year, 2019. The design included reconstruction of broken asphalt, installation of catch basins at Cape Cod berm, regrading, installation of underground water containment areas, otherwise known as the Coltech system, installation of stilling bases to collect surface water, paving of 4 new roads, widening of some intersections, as well as new topsoil along the roads, and hydroseeding is being scheduled. This Monday, the cemetery had a chip seal pavement applied to all the previously existing roads and the roads that were reconstructed where they needed. The newly paved road in the new section did not require this additional chip seal. There is loose stone on these roads, so please use extra caution and low speeds. You can't hear me? So please use extra caution and low speeds while driving up there this week and next. The roads will have a light sweeping. I believe there was one done this morning, and in anticipation of the Memorial Day Parade this coming Monday. After that, there'll be another sweeping of the stone. While the project progressed throughout the winter and the spring, the cemetery was always open, though at different times, different areas within were closed and visitors had to travel a different route to get where they were going. We had 4 burials during the construction. We thank all for their patience and understanding during this project, and we thank all the townspeople for allowing the Cemetery Commission to get this project done. Go up there for a walk, please leave your dogs at home, and see the beauty and the history that a cemetery holds. And then what I have here is the first 2 screens of the cover sheets of previous presentations as we went through this. And this will give you an idea of some of the before photos and what's been done. What you can't see in these photos are all the structures that are under the ground. I've got those photos if anybody wants to see them, but, okay, here goes. I'm gonna,
Shows, at least show the change in the drainage ditch. I think it's the,
She's got it in there. Isn't it?
yeah, those photos are all on here, and somebody that's a little bit more adept can stop it and rewind it.
You got it. You got it. You're on
It
the
won't
way
take
to it.
more than 2 minutes, guys.
Before, after, the eroded sections are just
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah.
So this is. And those are all screenshots of different gravestones here. This is North Ave, and I'm sorry, that was gravel that was washing out across grave sites. That's what it now looks like. There is a double catch basin there. Another place that was eroding out. That's what that looks like with a drain and Cultec all down through that cart path. So that's what that looks like. This is little Isabella. Her stone has yet to be put back. I will do that this weekend. And that is a stilling basin in behind to catch the surface water. There are 2 of them. There's one in the other corner. That is the new trench drain. This was Monday. Ooh, color's off. For those that don't know what chips goes into a chip seal, we all drive on it on Hunting Lane, Nason Hill. This is what they do. This is the process. Now, what's really cool, I think, is this guy is towing the other truck that is loading the hopper to continually supply the stone. There's the update.
Thank you.
Very good work up there. I mean, I know a few years ago when I was on advisory, when we were talking about funding this project, you could see that it really needed it, and you guys did a really, really good job.
Thank you.
If I could, I want to commend you for the diligence by which this has been pursued. And I know there were some challenges along the way, and the Cemetery Commission met those challenges, got this thing done. It's a beautiful job. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
and
And
what's the total cost for the project?
327.
town meeting, we had 327 was appropriated for this. We had originally had asked, it was projected by the engineers that it would be about 410. And then money was changed at prior to town meeting down to 327 to eliminate the paving out in the back section, the new section. And, but with the 327 and approximately, the final figures haven't come in because we're going to have some credits for some catch basins that weren't used because of constraints when we got into the project. So there's some supplies that'll be coming back. But so 327 and maybe an influx of another 20 from the Perpetual Care Interest Fund. You know, but we won't know that until we get the final credits and stuff. But basically, the 327 on budget and ahead of schedule, so.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
What are the discharge points for the stormwater? Is it just like another section of grass or impervious area?
There were two stilling basins, there was one, somebody can figure out how to go backwards.
Nah, we have pictures here. Yeah.
He's got the.
Yeah, you get the picture. There's two stilling basins. One is you're coming out, and it's just an area with a depression and a weir in the back, and it's gonna be seeded, so it helps to slow down the surface water. And there's another one in the far back cemetery where a lot of gravel was washing out and it was discharging. You can see historically it's discharged at points into someone else's property. So there's another big stilling basin there for the surface water there. Other than that, we have all under North Ave, there are 24 Cultec systems. So the water goes down into a catch basin and has two different areas, 24 units here, 12 here, 12 here. Because of some ledge, we had to do a change. So it goes down into the catch basin. If it overflows there, it goes into the Cultec system where they're long channels to disperse the water underground. And then we have also in the cart path, it goes down. Sean had recommended that we continue the Cultec across into the rest of the cart path, which we did. And so that's all underground. So the water is
Mostly recharge. That's actually really good.
It's all
That's great.
contained within the cemetery and it's all under.
Susan?
Just a quick comment on the surface.
Could you just
itself.
identify your, just to-
Sorry, Susie Wheelwright, Hunting Lane. And since our road was done with the chip seal, I have to say, I think it slows drivers. It's a good-looking surface, and I think the guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thanks.
Why were you looking at Sean and not at us?
Well, so if I may, one last thing, please, we've widened up some intersections because you could see historically people just take the inside turn. There are grave sites up there, guys. Not all of them have a gravestone. And we've widened up some intersections by 4 feet, 3.5 feet, because we know that there is no lot that's been sold in this area. Snow stakes went up to say please, and they've been run over every day. And so all I can ask is please, people, stay on the pavement. We'd like to get the grass established, and it's not gonna help if we're having to continually go out there and rake out all the tire marks. So there was enough roads up there that you can see that somebody's parked in front of you, that you can take the turn before and go around the block. So,
And she is looking at you.
oh, I'm looking, no, they haven't been up there, I haven't caught them yet, there's a few, but please stay on the pavement while we get the grass all established,
Thank you.
okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, this is all yours.
All right. Moving on, the next item on the agenda is a consideration of soil testing at Jamison Fields. Request of the planning board. Do you want to? Thank you, John.
That's what he said.
This is the transfer.
Okay, the planning board sent you a letter. I can read it or summarize it as you prefer.
Just summarize it.
Okay.
We've all had a chance to read it, so. But summarize it so the audience can hear kind of what it is that you're
Yep.
requesting.
Yep, so we're talking about testing Jamison Field for its capacity or ability to serve as a wastewater treatment plant recharge zone. And the select board considered this on March 14th and took no action. I think there was a concern that the perception was that supporting testing of Jamison Field would be perceived as giving a developer a proposal for 41 North Main the green light, or somehow imply that the select board or any board or committee in town was in favor of the project. So that was then. Now the planning board's discussed the town center and utilities in the town center several times, and since then, and we've really come to the conclusion that we're requesting you to authorize testing of Jameson Field. I'll explain why. The master plan talks about the town, in the town center section, talks about 4 goals. And the first 3 goals are really, what can we do to enhance the town center under the existing restrictions of water and sewer? And they escalate. Each goal talks about different ways that the town center could be improved. Some of those things have already happened. Increasing walkability, there's a Complete Streets grant that's been awarded and is in process of being implemented to add a crossing light and also to add a sidewalk, a section of sidewalk on North Main Street. So that's an example of something that's in there that's already been done. There's some other things, but those goals are defined. Goal 4 is directly applicable to this, to understanding what could be done with water and sewer in the town center, and it really lays out a very good process. And I think in past discussions that hasn't been really understood and maybe appreciated as much. So in referencing that, there's several steps that are defined in the master plan, particularly in Goal 4, about how to look at utilities in the town center. So as we look at this, we think it makes sense to follow that process, amending it slightly because there is a developer proposal. The property at 41 North Main and abutting that on Hunting Lane has been purchased. Something's going to happen there. And the more we looked at following the process, it makes sense to consider that and not ignore it. So we do think following that process makes a lot of sense. And that process includes several sections. One is develop a shared vision of the town center that includes improvements and changes. It includes a public outreach, gathering data and preferences, offline discussions, a lot of things that some of the discussions obviously have happened in part because of the conversations with the developer that have already occurred over the last couple of years, but not within this structure. So I think the structure of looking at the town center first and what we need is well laid out, and following those make a lot of sense. Gathering the data on the costs and the impact of different types of changes in the town center needs to be fully vetted, fully understood. One of the goals in the master plan has been recognized in the past, and the town has supported it in the past by supporting the Town Center Options Committee to get engineering help to understand the capacity of municipal water. And so there's been things done in the past, but now what we propose is to bring all that information that's been gathered and get more information so that in the end, all this information is being presented to the town to address the different impacts of it so that in a way that the town can really understand it and vote. One of the things we did in the past was a charrette. About 2008, I think we did a charrette around the Powder House Lane area of what could be done as an example. And the way that was done was there were examples of different types of architecture, building styles and things like that. And then it was presented, the folks that attended had a chance to pick out what they liked, and then after that, an architectural rendering was done as an example. So that was just in a very small section, but it was a great example of what we think is necessary for the town to be comfortable in making decisions about utilities in the town center, and also the impact of whatever does happen at 41 North Main. So within that structure, we think it makes a lot of sense to do that. The investment in doing this process is great. It will involve a lot of people's time, it will involve some costs, and we think it doesn't make sense to invest in that if we don't know if the concept that's being considered is technically feasible. If we're looking at Jameson Field as a recharge zone, and it turns out it technically isn't capable, it's just not going to work, then we've spent a lot of time and effort building visualizations, surveys, opinions based on the wrong design. So the financial impact, the long-term costs, all those things are dependent on what those options, what a potential utility site would be. So we don't want to spend a lot of time and invest a lot of boards and committees and the public departments' time on the wrong design. So we think that's a very good reason for us to authorize the testing of Jameson Field.
Thanks, John. One question, I guess the first question I have is the timing of the testing. With it being the middle of baseball season right now and that kind of thing, when are you thinking that it's a good time to do this?
Well, I understand there's different methods, and I'm certainly not an expert in. I mean, part of the idea is to get somebody who knows the requirements for a wastewater treatment plant recharge. But I understand there's different methods that can be used. There's alternative methods for typically septic Title V that are out of season. There's other methods of evaluating that. So from what I understand, it's technically possible to have the field evaluated in the summer. I'm not the end. That's not my call.
I think George also meant not just timing with the April 1 deadline for Title V testing, but I think it meant like interfering with baseball.
Interfering
right.
with the rec department. I want
Sure.
to make sure that the rec department is not interfered with at all when it comes to doing testing there.
I mean, the answer is I think the sooner the better, because the sooner we have an idea, we can develop all the rest of the supporting material that the town needs to make a decision.
The school I know has 2 or 3 weeks left, and their last week they do their field day down there and all that. You wouldn't
Right.
want to
Yeah.
do anything before that.
Yeah, and I don't know the impact of this type of testing. I don't know how.
And yeah, it also probably depends where on the field
Right.
you're going to be testing and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually my question is, in addition to timing, is there going to be an engineering assessment to design the test? In other words, how many sites you test? I sort of feel like we don't know enough yet to know, what the scope of the testing and the cost will be.
Right. Well, I think the authorization ought to be that should be part of what gets authorized. Same thing. It's chicken and egg, but I don't have that.
No, I didn't expect you to have it, but
I
I'm
think
just wondering if we should authorize a development of a concrete plan initially and then authorize implementing the plan. I don't know.
I'd say why break it up?
Because we don't know what the plan is, the way I look at it. I don't know. You're the engineer. What do you think?
I'm still more concerned about the timing of it, to my point of time, what answer you were giving versus what George was asking per se, with the high water time. Is there any way we can get an opinion? Is it Stantec or Econ? Who's the engineer?
The proposal that they had talked about before was Stantec, right?
Do we have an opinion from them of whether that? Because I know Title V is actually done in such a way that it's what do you call it? It's made very prescribed, and there's more judgment used when you do a wastewater treatment plant. But I'd like to know a little something about, will it hurt the analysis doing it after April 1, after the Title V recommended April 1? And that's something engineering-wise I would like to know.
Yeah.
I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Yeah. I guess, again, I think should authorize getting a plan and the testing. If you want to say come back with the results of the plan before release or something, I think that makes a lot of sense.
And the other concern I have, which is also, when we were here before, there was concern because it was suggested that it was too much to support a single development. There's also discussion that there's an existing leach field out there, which is going to have a limited lifespan, which is for Pine Hill. In fact, 2 leach fields for Pine Hill are actually out there right now, which have limited lifespans. We talked about doing a reduced scope, or doing the full-fledged one. Given that it's data that would be useful for the town for the existing leach field under the fields, would it still be beneficial to just, request a developer to fund it? Not do it, but fund it. Cut the town a check. Might be more symbolic than anything else, but I think it's going to be something.
Yeah, I think the funding aspect, I think is, there's different options. It's fine, but I think our focus in our discussions has clearly been on the town center. It could, there were concerns brought up during our discussions. One included why now, and the answer is because it's in the plan to do this. It makes sense. Our town center utilities now are very fragile, so it makes sense to do this. And specifically now, it's because if we look at what's been done at Abbey Road, our own municipal campus well, things that have been spent at different businesses, municipal buildings, and residential homes in the town center, it'd be a shame to look at the continued expense and those costs that are invested and not look at an opportunity to include that money into the funding of the project. But at the end, the results of the tests are, that doesn't mean we decide to use it or how it gets set up. Part of, I think, the scope that needs to be worked once we find that there's technically feasible is establishment of district and things like that. And all those processes are time-consuming, expensive, and very doable. But we want to find out if we're wasting our time based on that.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Paul.
John, there's a reference in the memo to meetings and offline discussions about the project, and I was wondering about these offline discussions because I have no idea what that has been. I haven't been involved in them.
Yeah,
Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. I mean, other boards and committees, individuals. I mean, it's been the topic in a political campaign recently. So there's been, it's the interest in 41 North Main is certainly being discussed quite a bit. That's in addition to the discussions in meetings the select board hosted, and then prior to that, 2 years ago, the planning board hosted a couple of meetings with the developer. So outside of those meetings, there's been plenty of discussion.
What is the status of the 41 North Main project? I'm putting that in quotes because I've seen different versions of that, but is there an application pending?
No, there's nothing, there's no proposal. The planning board looked at the two most recent ideas or concepts that are posted on the developer's website. We looked at those and started talking about them and came back to the reality is, yeah, that's all interesting. We look at those as discussions and ideas just like the previous ones. And the folks who have attended our planning board meetings and the board itself all concurred. We don't want to just continue having these discussions. We really need to put this into a process that can lead to a decision. But in the end, this is all decided by the town. The voting that's required for funding for setting up a district, any zoning changes, all go through the process of boards of official hearings and voting at getting on the warrant and voting by the town. Zoning requires 2/3 vote. The districts, any funding gets voted twice really. It gets voted at town meeting and by ballot.
And just to clarify one point for everyone, that the developer hasn't presented anything or even come to the select board since that February 14th meeting. that's the last time we've had any discussions with the developer.
Yeah, and just to reiterate one of the points that John was making, unlike 40Bs where it's a completely different process with limited input and limited pressure points for the town to alter the project, the EA zoning bylaw, the Pulte project on Maple Street, had set up into the bylaw provision for the planning board to determine whether or not enough data and information was available to be presented. It was, my recollection, it was a project that had some good things and some bad things. It had smart zoning, it was maintaining the trail system set back from the road. But my recollection was town meeting voted, a majority voted in favor of it, a slight majority, but it required a 2/3 vote. The other major project, Coolidge Crossing, was a result of many discussions that required a 2/3 vote, a special town meeting. Virtually every board in town supported it and passed with 87% support, which for the town of Sherborn is close to a unanimous vote. This project I cannot, unless it becomes a 40B, if it's an EA or any of the other likely alternatives, it will require town meeting vote. We get to decide. Town meeting is the legislative body. This board, planning board, can be gatekeepers in terms of the discussions, what it is, what's presented. We schedule whether or not there's a special town meeting like there was for Coolidge Crossing, or whether or not it even makes it to town meeting. And at our, a couple months ago, I pointed out that I was unaware of anybody in town that ties this to the Lebarsky project. I've got one comment that I want to pass in. I'll do it when we're doing the citizens' comments that somebody sent in to me that I'll relay. But I just want to reiterate the point that town meeting decides whether or not projects like this get supported or not.
And I want to go back to the point that John made, that you're asking for the testing so we have that data point when you're doing your planning for whether we want public utilities in our downtown, regardless of what the plan is for 41 North Main Street. Like, that's what we discussed back in March. That's kind of, so I think that's where we're at. You want to see if it makes sense to get that data point. Does anyone else have comments?
Well, I guess
before I go to you guys, I just want
on
to
the
see if
financial side, we would have to do a reserve fund transfer though to approve the cost of it, right? It's not budgeted anywhere. Is that right?
For the
Right.
testing?
Yeah, for the cost of the testing.
Yeah, I think the testing that was proposed, I'm certainly fine with getting it rebid or get more bidding on that or whatever. But I think the cost was around $7,000.
Huh. And so was that in anyone's budget or not? So it'd be a reserve fund
it
transfer.
would have to be a reserve fund transfer
So we would have to approve the reserve fund transfer anyway.
to pay for
Pay for it. Plus, to really before they started the work.
Well, we also have a line item for
Yeah.
various testing and
engineering. Yeah.
engineering projects. We, the
Right.
select board. Yeah.
Okay. So it wouldn't be a reserve fund transfer? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know, David, do we have a line item for that?
No, I mean, it depends on, we can use the consultant.
The consulting line, that's the one that you're thinking of, I
Right.
think, is that,
Right.
we have that consulting
Because
line.
that has actually because that got transferred, I believe, from CM&D or town buildings. That has the complete streets design
They had a
cost in that
separate,
too.
the selectmen have a separate consultant line in the
From
office.
from the one that came from town buildings.
Yeah.
Which would apply to this, because this is a consulting company doing the test.
And we used it a couple of years ago for a Board of Health request.
Right. I
One-
could probably find.
One other point I just wanted to bring up that we've had discussions about Jameson Fields in the past was the opinion from our town council about the change of use, because I know, Paul, you've brought this up a number of times. And from the opinion that he gave, I think as long as the wastewater treatment facility, the building wasn't there, it's not a change of use. If it's just a discharge, that means it's underground, there's no, the wastewater treatment could be located on another parcel, potentially.
I asked for a copy of anything from town council, never got anything, so
Oh,
if
you
there's,
didn't get a copy?
if there's something from town council, could I have a copy?
I don't remember when it was. Came in.
Yeah, I think it was when we asked for it at the last meeting, I think in March was the last time we discussed this, so I think it was soon after that that we got the, I think we got the opinion, right, David?
Yeah.
Okay.
Could somebody give me a copy?
So, I just wanted to bring that up because I think that's an important piece of the discussion. So, I see a lot of people had hands up. Susie, I think you were the first one with your hand up, so if you want to go ahead.
Okay, I think that a lot of people still have the perception.
Yeah. Oh, can you get, I'm sorry, just for the people watching it, it's not live, but they are recording it. I'd like you to be up at a microphone when you talk, if you could. Just so people can hear you. Thank you.
Susie Wheelwright, Hunting Lane. I did send all of you an email with a few thoughts, and it was late, so I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it yet.
I did.
You did. You did mention one of the points. But I think that something we need to talk about is both the perception is still, I believe, among the majority of people that this testing of the ball fields has to do with 41 North Main. And I think it will have to do with the negotiation that the town does with the developer. That is an inevitable part of any development, particularly one of this size. It seems to me that if the tests on the ball fields are approved and go forward, that these negotiations will be, the developer will have the advantage of pushing for a larger or a 40B project if the town field will support that larger project. And the developer will know that because, well, especially if you let him pay for it, but whether or not it's a public document, it I think is witnessed by the Board of Health and the health agent. So all of that information is going to be public and it will go into the mix, and it gives him an out. He hasn't tested his own property. He has no idea really, other than guessing what he can do with his own property that he owns. And Jeff, I heard you ask this question, which I thought was the best question of a long ago meeting, about whether he should be required to find out whether and what he can do with the property that he owns, which shows that every developer and every citizen in this town is treated equally by boards that are objective and that follow their own procedures. So I think that's very important. On the other hand, and the planning board has not insisted on this, or as far as I know, even asked the developer to test and find out what he can do on his own property. If, on the other hand, he finds that he can't do very much, then I believe we are going to get a smaller project, a better project, because I think most of the projects that have come before the planning board have all had a scale problem. They're too large. They're not appropriately scaled for Sherborn. This comes out over and over. But if we have tested the ball fields and the ball fields will support a large system, then he knows that. And I believe that will affect the negotiations and not in a positive way for the town and for the outcome. Thank you.
Neil, go ahead.
Neil Kessler, 43 Page Farm Road. Just a couple of things based on John Higley's comments earlier. The first one is just related to, there's sort of the general tenor of what you were saying, John, was that we should do this first, this testing, because otherwise it would be a complete waste of time and money to go through all of this other developing a shared vision and I forget what the other one was. most relevant, oh, no, sorry. I'm reading in the wrong spot. Analyzing, contribution of specific businesses, things that you sort of brought up. And the thing is that I essentially what that says is that all of the processes that are laid out in the master plan for determining what to do in town center are useless if we don't have the use of Jamison ball fields, and I just don't think that logic holds. There is a possibility of putting infrastructure elsewhere, I'm assuming, that can be used in town center. And so I don't think there's an urgency for Jamison Fields testing specifically that it needs to precede what we do with those goals, because those goals and the recommendations within them in the master plan are both robust, they're diverse, and those are going to serve whatever we do in town center going forward, just regardless of what happens with Jamison ball fields. The other thing I just wanted to say is, you also said that, you talked about a town vote. You said the town needs to make a decision, the sooner the better. And given the fact that the developer has not actually, first of all, they've changed their proposal several times. They have no application in front of us. They haven't been in front of the select board since February. I'm not sure what the urgency is. I believe that the recommendations in Goal 4, if we're to go forward on those, are all things that should be done first. And as I said in the meeting here on March 14th, I think that the testing of the ball fields, if it's determined we need infrastructure to improve downtown, that those things ought to go first, and then only as an implementation detail should we begin to look for sites. So I just think, and I would reiterate, that the need to do this now does not exist. It is only a desire that is vague and I don't think very well founded in what the process is that's laid out and the master plan. So I would just say that I think we should wait and not give away the leverage that Susie was talking about until we're ready to really negotiate with any developer. Thank you.
Thank you. Can Marion?
Well, first, I appreciate with
Marion,
what...
will you just identify yourself?
Oh, Marion Neutro, 25 Prospect, also a member of the planning board. I appreciate what both Susie and Neil have said. And Lord knows I am totally in favor of following the process that we laid out in the general plan. In fact, it's close to my heart. And I think it's close to the whole planning board's heart. But it does not mean that we need to make a decision on a vision and do nothing else for the first year that it would take to get a vision in place that everyone agrees on. Really, if we want to come to some agreement on what should happen in town center over the next 10 or 15 years, we need to do a number of things concurrently. And that's what was already in place before this 41 North Main question came up. We had a town center options committee because we wanted to know what our options are. And I would argue that even if nothing happens at 41 North Main, and at the pace it's going, it may not happen for a long time, we still want to know what our options are. Town center has no place for a mother to take her kids to pee when she goes shopping. There's no way for the restaurants to expand. We have other reasons besides 41 North Main to know what our options are. And that's what the Town Center Options Committee has been working on for the last 10 or more years. So this is just another piece of the puzzle. And I understand, the last time this was discussed at this board, I raised my own concern about the perception, which I think is a huge problem here. I totally agree with you guys on that. On the other hand, we still need to get our data. We need to know what we're talking about. Discussions tend to go round and round and round because we don't have facts. In many parts of this process, we don't have facts. And it's not only the Jamison Fields. We don't know where the best source of water is or if there's enough. We don't know, in fact, whether we even want to change anything in town center because we haven't done the visioning process. I agree with that. But tonight, John was just putting forth a proposal to get this one piece of the puzzle in place. But there are many other pieces that the planning board is starting to work on simultaneously. That is, I agree with you. We need to know what people want in town center and what they don't. And we're starting the planning of a visioning process that will take all the visions that we've gotten in previous years, because this isn't the first time we've done this, and put them together and design a survey and a visioning process for the whole town to look at it again, look at all of this again. And the other thing I would say is, and that would include, in fact, if the town makes its consensus clear, then we have to do a market analysis. We want to know that this isn't going to cost the town anything, but it's going to contribute financially to the town. And as far as 41 North Main, it's kind of a shame in a way that it's muddying the process, because it's not the only thing going on in town center. And in fact, the large oversized projects that have been presented so far, I don't think any of us like. So we have to still deal with the perception that we're somehow in the pocket of the developer because we're moving forward on getting more data. And that certainly isn't the case. And, I know the planning board is certainly not in the pocket of the developer, but they've asked us, what does the town want? And we have to work out some kind of an answer. So I've gone on much longer than I intended to, but just to say that I too am concerned about perception, and I would be concerned about, even though it's good to get money wherever we can, given our situation, I'm concerned about the developer footing the bill. I would rather get a grant or find some other way to make it clear that we're doing this independently to get our own ducks in order.
Thank you, Marion.
Hi, Matt Vitale, 1 Mill Street, and while I'm a member of the Board of Health, I'm expressing only my own views. So we just had the culmination of 8 months of regulatory revision where we added 1 sentence to 1 regulation with ample public meetings and lots of requests for more data. We talked about cesspools with lots of requests for more data. And I think that there's a piece here that I have seen nothing at 41 North Main that felt like a good idea to me. So I would say my own approach, personal opinion to that project is a deep, profound lack of enthusiasm because it didn't feel like the right fit for me. At the same time, I've yet to see anything in Sherborn that moved with any kind of urgency because we calmly deliberate as a 300-year-old town, 400, 500, 1,000. We have a town meeting that's a vestige of another age, and we have all of these boards that are very much traditional structures. So I don't think there's an urgency, but now will always be now, and it won't be later. And that will always bring attention to us about why is now now. And I think the reason now is because as you look at downtown, we've got tensions, whether it's 41 North Main or something else. I think for me, the piece that I would argue is, I think we need information. I would echo your point that I think whoever controls the purse strings has the power, and I would encourage us to say this is a penny wise, pound foolish if we take their money to do this assessment. But at the same time, having sat at Board of Health and having people frustrated by a lack of data, it's hard for me to walk by the chance to have information, whether I agree with what we do with it. If we don't have it, we don't know, and we really can talk for a really long time without knowing.
Exactly.
That's all.
Thank you. Did anyone else have a comment? Go ahead. No.
Andrew Sylvia, 3 Elliott Street. I had a few comments and questions. One, I really appreciated the board highlighting baseball and the sports that are actually using the fields right now, which we do lots of business talk, lots of development talk. That should be number one, and I was glad it was commented on. The response we got from that, I was disappointed in. It was, doesn't matter, let's just move forward. I think is not a very good attitude to take toward it. before anything was approved, I would like to know exactly what the impact would be, and it should have zero impact on the kids. Other points that have come up is a need for data. More importantly, should be reliable data. There are certain time standards on when these tests are supposed to be performed. I know a lot of people in the room will know these standards better than me. But if we do these tests outside of when the reliable data is supposed to be achieved and found out, what are we really getting if we're just rushing into this? Isn't it more appropriate for the town making such a big decision as this to do it during the appropriate time, not in some emergency standard, such as a septic fails and now we need to rush to allow people to live in their house? We're not facing an emergency, so why are we looking for possibly unreliable data? Other issue I have is the allowable use of the property. I know that was a question that came up, and there may or may not be a legal opinion on that. If the proposed testing is to further something that is outside of the permissible use of that property, would that or would that not be a trespass on the property? And potentially something that would go against the benefit of the town and the townspeople to allow the testing that is going to further something that would not be permissible. I think the town needs answers on that before anything would be approved, and things should be put off to an appropriate time.
Thank you.
I also address a couple of points. As far as illegal use, Article 97, since it is an existing leach field now, then actually it would be consistent because we're simply doing recharge testing. As far as the timing, what's the time? I'm sorry, Daryl, to put you on the spot. Was it January 1 to April 1?
No, November through April.
Okay, whatever.
And there are a variety of reasons for that. There are certain things that one might observe in the field, such as redox, what we always call modeling. And that, if you observe that at any time...
Can you actually, Daryl, just so people can hear you, sorry.
Sorry, I called you.
Just the people at home.
Sorry, Daryl.
No problem. All right, so there are certain things that, if they're present, the modeling being the most reliable measure that we're aware of for determining historical high groundwater levels, because that's what we're after, and that's where some of the complexity comes, is you want to know what it could get to at some point so that you don't have a septic system sitting in or very close to groundwater. So that you might observe at any time, but the further you are away from a rainy period, the trickier it gets. And one of the reasons I believe that, and this happened before I was on the board, but that the season was narrowed, is that for homeowners or others, developers, they would get weaker information and it would mislead them about what might be done. And sometimes groundwater adjustment factors are more conservative than if you can observe certain things in the field. So it's not a simple answer to that.
No. Yeah.
As nothing around Board of Health.
I think November through April
tends to be. So there's that, and then there's some, on the use of the fields, and I've mentioned this before, there's another aspect of use in that septic fields don't really like a lot of heavy activity happening on top of them. So that is something to be resolved of. Are there special design provisions for if you're going to have a leaching field in a heavily used area? You're certainly not going to want it under the baseball diamonds. But what does it mean to have heavy lawn cutting equipment running over it with some frequency? And that I don't have the answer to, and it probably depends on a variety of factors, including soil type and frequency of that, possible compaction, and how that might affect it. So that's something that I think should be understood as well.
So just to pull that together, I think, I'm not sure how we're going to vote, but if we do vote to move forward with this, I would want assurance before we put a shovel in the ground from Stantec that about their opinion about the timing, because it is different for a treatment plant. It's not the same as Title V. It's not. You know what I mean? And it's more engineering judgment put into it. But I think it's still, I don't want to waste our time or money. I would still just want to actually have an opinion from Stantec about the timing and wanting to accommodate that.
Who's Stantec?
That's the engineering company that gave the
They
proposal.
gave a proposal that we talked about in March.
And that we
And
talked
if I
about
could-
earlier.
Yeah, just mention on that, because Sean and I met and talked about that a bit, and while I'm guessing, I think that the budget might be sufficient, but their scope of work really missed the mark on what we're looking for. But that's easily resolved. I think they just didn't understand perhaps the request being made of them, so.
Chuck, I know you had some.
Yeah, Lenny,
I had one.
Let-
Can he just, I wanted them to finish their comments if they can, and then.
In response to the land use where it's been identified that it's currently used as a leaching field, where the entire presentation tonight has been to do it for the benefit of developing a new system or a new water treatment, would the fact that there's an existing leaching field be pre-test to allow the testing versus actual testing for the new system that's going in?
Well, there's another factor that we actually have a legal opinion from council saying that it's not an inconsistent use, and Article 97 wouldn't apply.
So that there is an opinion.
Right, from town council. Yep.
Thank you.
Lanny Rubin asked me to pass on his comments. He couldn't be at the meeting, so I'm going to just pass on his email, and then I remember my own comments, but these are Lanny Rubin's comments. He asked me to share them with the board in the meeting. Sorry to be struggling to articulate my thoughts for whatever they are worth, since it appears that a septic system under Jameson Field would only really serve the Zabarski development. I believe he means Labarski. It would be completely inappropriate to test now because there are so many unanswered questions about the project, which are fundamental. How would the proposed tax scheme actually work? And would the town simply be giving away money without really knowing if there would ever be a return, or whether the town might be left holding the cost if the project fails? He has a number of other comments, but I think that captures his view that this proposal is tied to the Labarski 41 North Main Street project. Now, these are my comments, not Lanny's. Susie, you made the great point, which is that we don't want Labarski guessing at what the data is. I don't want the town guessing either. We can all come up with our worst case and best case scenarios, but why speculate? That's why at the March 14th meeting, I said, I don't want to ask the developer for the money. For $7,000, I want this to be information and data for the town to have. Dr. Vitale articulated it far better than I did, but I want this to be a data-driven decision. I disagree with one comment that you made, Susie, which is this isn't tied to the Labarski project, but if the data comes in showing that there is the possibility of additional use of that field, I think that increases our leverage, not reduces it. If it's something he needs, I've yet to see anything in the Labarski project that I like. It's a non-starter. I think it's been a waste of everyone's time and effort because it is so large and so out of keeping for what's needed for the town center. But I wish we had supported this on March 14th. We would have hit the April session. We should have, in my view, this board should have approved it. And so I'm going to be making a motion to approve the expenditure. I'd like to leave a little leeway in the $7,000 figure so that we can negotiate the scope on the condition that the testing be done to minimize, if not eliminate, any impact on the recreational use of the fields. I think this is data the town needs. The master plan, the memo that the planning board sent us quotes one of the recommendations of Goal 4. I'm going to quote from it, which is to, quote, support and guide the Town Center Options Committee with resources needed to complete the analysis of the technical feasibility and projected cost of installing and maintaining a public water and/or septic system within a strictly limited town center district. That has nothing to do with 41 North Main Street. It has nothing to do with the Labarskis. I want the data. I don't want us all speculating on what the data is. my worst case can be your best case, and we're just wasting our time. I want to know what we can and can't do. I would prefer that we had done it before April 1st. I understand that this is a different level of testing. I would like to do it sooner rather than later. So my motion is to approve an expenditure of up to $10,000 for the testing requested by the planning board, with the mandate that it be done to minimize any impact on recreational use of the fields.
Before we advance your
Can I get a second, then we can have more discussion?
I'd like to modify it, or
Yeah, so
do I have to make a counter proposal first? I'd like to go ahead, Eric. You go first.
Just some overall comments. I mean, the timing is unfortunate because clearly it's going to be associated with 41 North Main, both of those who are for it or against it. Classic example is a very progressive watershed conservation group, Charles River Watershed Association, did a smart sewer study on behalf of Sherborn several years ago. Susie referenced it in a meeting a few months ago. It's a good study. It had the treatment plant with the recharge in the ball fields. Presented before the planning board, no one cared. Now all of a sudden, everyone cares. So clearly, it's almost impossible to disassociate the development with this testing. I saw some alternatives before the planning board, I think a couple months ago, where they had, what they could do, with and without, a septic system there, with or without a treatment plant with the ball fields. And, it struck me as a little, I don't know if it passed a straight face test. It kind of had like, everyone make this big 40B, if you don't let us use it, whatever. So what I would like to do, and what I'm going to support, is an approval of the testing contingent upon we can observe testing on their property. That then, only then, do you have the leverage and actually know. Then you know what can be done in the field. Remember, we want to give the rights for it there, and you know what can be done on their property. And then when you get alternatives, you start seeing things, you start looking at things, and you actually know what can be done and what's fair. And then we actually know, it's an open book. And then we can have real discussions versus having these weird alternatives with and without and stuff like that. So I'm only going to vote for it if we can actually observe testing on their property and they have to agree to it.
The testing, well, it's our properties.
No, also on theirs, both.
In
I
other
want to
words-
know how big a system they can build on their property if they don't get this plan.
I think he's saying, to clarify what you're saying, I think he's saying they won't get access to our testing data on Jameson unless they grant us the rights to the testing data on their
It
property.
is
that
public
what you're
data.
saying?
Yeah, I don't think we can hold it back though if we don't.
I think he's saying we're not going to approve. We're not going to bother tasting Jameson until we've also.
Till we have
They
permission.
agree that they're
Okay.
going to test their field as
And we
well.
observe.
And we observe.
We
yes.
observe.
Because my clarification was somewhat similar. I completely agree with Chuck. I think data is important, and I think it gives us more leverage, not less. We can choose to use the leverage. The only thing I want to understand is who's going to design the testing, and I would like both Sean and the Board of Health and the appropriate parties to approve. But we have one proposal, but I think we should get more than one proposal.
Mhm.
And I think there's been some other firms identified, and I'd like to at least understand who's going to approve the testing plan. I don't know that it has to come back to us or not, but I would like to have the Board of Health and the CM&D and whoever else you recommend approve the plan.
I agree with that, as well as Chuck said, to minimize recreation, have recreation kind of sign off
Yeah.
on the timing of it as well, because they're the ones that know exactly what the schedule is for that field, and I don't want it, like as I said before, I mean, the kids have field day in a few weeks, and there's still baseball games going on that we don't want to disrupt. Just before we go back there, I just want to address one thing that Lanny said in his comments, and people have been discussing online and about the town giving away millions to pay for this. The only person who's ever talked about a TIF was the developer, and no one on any board has ever supported a TIF. They proposed it, and that's the last that anybody has really talked about it. I know I have not been in support of.
They've been asked to provide a legal opinion that the TIF
That the TIF could even be used
for this purpose,
which they haven't.
and they haven't provided it.
Right. So it's been
Normally TIFs are used for
been ongoing
economic
discussion
development.
online that really hasn't gone anywhere as when it comes to the boards.
And even
I
that.
just wanted to address that.
Yeah, and even then, the TIF actually, the way the math works in TIF actually, because you build something bigger that's you wouldn't get otherwise. It's the whole canned language of giving away millions is this classic false narrative to make scare tactics.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I have one more
Oh, yeah,
comment
one more
here.
comment, sorry.
One comment to, Eric, I respectfully, completely disagree. I don't want this to be tied in any way to 41 North Main Street. I think we're wasting our time to even talk about it until they come up with the proposal we're talking about it. This is to get data to see whether or not the town can get grant money and do something on its own, what the town options are. I see nothing, none of the Lebarski proposals have any interest to me, so I don't want to tie it in. I don't have a tie-in that we only do the testing after they've tested their facility. I want them to be completely separate.
But it's inevitable. You know, it's inevitable, just given the timing. Like I said, 4 or 5 years ago, Charles River did their test. No one cared about the leach field under the ball fields then. And we've always been talking about it. You know, I've been part of that downtown water supply committee for 12 years with Roger Demler and so on. And, you know, it goes in circles all the time. Do we want to get something ready? We say we want to establish districts. But, you know, the timing of this and the fact that we actually execute it, you know, to me it doesn't pass a straight face test to say it's not associated with it all. And perception-wise, we want to associate it, but the fact is, it is data that will be public information. And I think as alternatives go before the planning board, I think it's critical that we know what they can and can't do on the property. You know, yes, it's maybe in an ideal world, this is just for us to use and to put in our own system, you know, 10 years down the road and so on. But the fact is, it will be data that they will have available to them, it will be public information. And they're going to propose alternatives saying, here's what we can do with and without it, and we won't know if that's true or not. And they've already done it. They went through the planning board, it was a month or two ago, whatever, before and or with and without alternatives. At least for my vote. If you want my vote, I think it has to be contingent upon observing testing on their property.
I'm going to take a few more comments from that haven't had a chance to talk yet, so go ahead. No, you can go next after me.
Jay Somerville, 24 Hunting Lane. Very quickly, just you've already addressed it, and I guess it's going to be addressed further. But, excuse me, Paul made it very clear, I think it was the March meeting, that in his expert opinion, the deed by which the land was transferred for the ball fields would not allow the use of a massive leaching field under. Now, I guess that's being addressed, or it's been addressed, and maybe we'll hear what that legal opinion is. The other point I wanted to make was, and it pertains to this proposed testing, would it not make a difference as to the parameters of the testing, what kind of capacity we're looking at? I mean, if we're talking exclusive of 41 North Main, town center is a relatively minuscule amount of discharge, if you will, a day. Lebarski was proposing a wastewater treatment plant that would handle 80,000 gallons a day, expandable to 120,000 gallons. That, if you'll pardon my French, is a shitload of water and everything else going under that field versus what might just be town center use. Lebarski is sitting there waiting, thinking that the town is going to pick up the tab on this thing. He was supposed to drill a test well, a well. He chose not to do that. He has done no perking up there because he knows 90% of that land will not perk. He can't do what he wants to do without town water and town sewage treatment.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you want to. There's some things I want to say. It's not
Good evening. Doug McDougall. I'm a part-time employee for the Recreation Department. And thank you for thinking of the recreation and kids first. That was nice. Our ideal time to have the fields tested, late July, August. Not the good time when you're talking November or April. I've been a past recreation director for too many years, but recreation people can move on the fly. And if it has to be done in November, December, we'll figure out a way to either move fields to another, move some over to Fesden, over to Laurel Farm. We'll make it work somehow, because I think it is important. We get the data out and figure out what it is. And our biggest concern is going to be, where are the test hole pits put? Hopefully not at home plate on J4, not on the pitcher's mound at such and such. It's, where can we put them that is going to do the least amount of damage, but get the information that you need.
Absolutely.
I wish I could say that the past 2 springs have been great. We could have got a lot accomplished. We're still chasing water on a bunch of our fields. So with this rain that we've had, we just need to be able to know when you're going to do it, so we can plan ahead, and maybe we're going to have to move some fields or kids' games to other towns. And it can be done. It's just we need time to know when it's going to happen. So I don't know if there's any other questions about it, but I've worked with numerous towns putting septic systems under athletic fields, and it does work. You do have to worry about heavy equipment being on it. One of the things I think that also has to be taken into consideration is that the library arts and crafts program that they have in May, that's part of the fabric of the town.
Absolutely.
That has to happen also. So we need to be able to be ready for the second week of May, I believe it is.
They're hoping that we'll be back at the library this year, but I understand your point.
I think so. I have to agree with you. But from what we've seen of the crowds showing up,
Yeah, I know.
I'm not sure if it's going to fit at the library.
A lot of kids need that fair to buy their mother's
Yes. Well, thank you for the perspective from Rick, because as you said, I mean, I think that's got to be one of our top priorities in planning this testing. All right. Paul said he had a couple more comments, and then I think we should talk about a motion Chuck made a long time ago.
So I have 6 points I want to make. First, I want to say that I completely support the notion of fixing the utility problems in the business area in town. Many years ago, on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, I met with DEP and created this notion of grandfathered uses in the downtown area. And as part of them buying into overlooking what we had downtown, was a commitment I made to them on behalf of the town of Sherborn that we would address the issues in the downtown area to provide environmental protection. So here we are, a decade later, we have not made much progress on that issue. So I support the notion, and I commend the planning board and others for addressing the issue. The second point I would make is that I support the master plan process. The board's voted on the master plan. It does address the downtown area. It does say that should be a focus for the town. So I agree that that's very much in our public interest, addressing the environmental issues in the downtown area. The third point I want to make is that the legal opinion, I asked to see the legal opinion, and I was just given the legal opinion, and it basically says that they need more information. And that's, to me, not a definitive legal opinion. And I've done my own research, and I have my own opinion on that issue. So I don't see the green light that has been suggested is possible for Jameson Field. The fourth point I would make is that any information, let me start that differently. When you're dealing with a developer who has a lot of land, the biggest concern that I would have as a municipal lawyer is when and if they might roll out a 40B project that can trump everything. And in order to do the kind of 40B projects that I've seen in other communities, huge projects, 300 units, multiple bedrooms, big impacts on communities, the limiting factor is water and sewer. That's your real control over 40B. I am very hesitant to put into play in this community the possibility of a large capacity sewer availability where there's no commitment from this developer never to use 40B. There's been no waiver, no one's talked about that. And while he hasn't pushed a 40B at this point, in other communities I've seen developers negotiate until they get all kinds of information, and then they unveil their real plan, which is a 40B, and you have given away at that point most of your ability to oppose or control that development. So I am very concerned about providing that kind of information to a developer. The next point I want to make is that my kids love playing at Jamison Field, and I think it's my duty as a selectman, and I think it's in the best interest of the town to preserve and protect the Jamison Fields to the very greatest extent that we can. It's been a tremendous resource for the community. It's, to me, perfectly located. I know we have facilities out Pheasant Field. I know we have facilities up at Laurel. But Jamison Field is a place where the kids can go to get an ice cream at C&L Frosty's. It's right in the downtown area. It would be very hard to replicate. Leaching fields, no matter what your technology is going to have impacts. The impacts can be the vents that are needed, those little lollipops that stick up. It might need pumping stations. There might be odor. There could be a variety of things. There may need to be mounds to make these things work, as the existing leaching fields have been. The leaching fields that are there now are municipal, only municipal use facilities. The fire station, Pine Hill. There is no commercial leaching going on in these fields. To me, going from municipal use to commercial use is a change of use. So my sixth and last point is putting all of this together. I've been encouraging the public, the planning board, anybody who would listen, to move away from Jamison Field. Take Jamison Field away from this whole discussion. It seems logical to me, just looking at the lay of the land, that the way the glaciers move north to south, that the Butler Street Garage, and I know Sean's going to kill me for this, but the Butler Street Garage, the Butler Street Garage should be in the same geological setting. That's a much better location. I know we have our DPW garage there. I know we store materials there, but there are no kids there.
Well, just a few.
So where I come out on this is, I am not going to support any use of the Jamison Fields for a solution to the downtown area. While I support a solution for the downtown area, and I'd be there with you 100% on almost anything, but not touching the Jamison Field. People who know me, that I've been on the board for a while, they know that there are some things for me that are very important. Farm Pond, Jamison Fields, our open space, these things to me are untouchable. And whether it's the legal issue or whether it's the project issue, those aren't half as important to me as it is the kind of community that I want to see going forward. And to me, that's about our kids. It's about these assets that this town has that have been entrusted to us temporarily for us to carry on to future generations. I don't want to see anything happen to Jamison Field. So I am going to vote no on every one of these motions, as long as it involves testing at Jamison Field.
Thanks, Paul. Do any other members of the board have anything else to add? I guess you had made a motion, and there are some alternatives, so I just want to get an idea of if somebody wants to make a motion, whether it's, if you want to hold on to the same motion or if you want to adjust it. Oh, but it was been proposed to be amended. So that's what we're talking about, whether the motion's being amended or not.
Not another motion.
Not another motion, I'm saying whether that motion is going to be amended or
Well,
not.
actually, I'd prefer to withdraw my motion
Okay.
and start over so that we have the precise language of what you're
I
had in
think
mind, Jeff.
mine's Eric's a hard one. I think if he's got me thinking. So my motion was simply I want to make sure that there's a team of people that approve the design of the testing, which includes if it's past April. It turns out I'm not as concerned about that because we had so much rain this year, which the ball field guy told us that we may be past April, but it doesn't feel like we are rain-wise this year. But I just want the design to reflect the Board of Health input, the design of the testing plan, if we do approve a testing plan, reflect the appropriate, which I think it would be anyway. I know I'm speaking to the audience here, but that's my only change.
Yeah, and I would accept that as an amendment. That makes
So you
sense.
want to make a new motion? Or
Yeah.
since you withdrew your motion, now you can make a new
Right,
motion.
I would move to approve an expenditure of up to $10,000 for the planning board to conduct soil testing at Jameson Field with the input from the Board of Health, CM&D director, and that the testing be done to minimize the condition that the testing be done to minimize the impact on any recreational activities there.
Do you want a second?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? I think we've all talked about this long enough. I think I hadn't really given my opinion, but I'm voting for this just based on the need for data. I think Matt Vitale put it the best that, we've been talking about this for a long time, and let's get the data and see where we're at. So
as much as I want to support it, there's no more consideration on my amendment. Make it intentional. All right.
I mean, unless
No, I want this completely separate.
Yeah,
I want this
I
to
agree
be,
with Chuck on that.
I want this to be town data.
I agree.
It still be well, as you know, my thought. It'd still be town data, but I don't think anyone with a straight face can really say it's separate. Just given the timing.
I can tell you with a straight face that this, I've seen nothing from the Lebarskis that is worth spending time talking about. They're all non-starters.
I agree with
in
you.
my
I
opinion.
think we've talked about that. I definitely agree with you. But the fact is, they're going to do something there, and I think it's critical to know what they can do there. And you're not going to know without knowing what they knowing that they're.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah. Oh, hold up.
you entertain a comment?
We're about to go.
Zero.
I can't take any more comments. I mean, we haven't heard from Sean. He's very involved in this process. The
I'm gonna limit it
motion
to what Eric
actually.
just said.
Okay, go ahead.
Any testing they do would most likely have to be witnessed by DEP and the Board of Health on that property, so definition, I think we get that down.
Oh, I know that, but they've been coming with alternatives without that.
And I think the planning board could ask them, if they come to them with a plan, say, we want to see testing of what you can do on your property. And that's
Right.
yeah,
Right,
I
I
think
think that's the
leave it to the
leverage.
planning board to say, that's what they're gonna ask when they bring them a plan.
Right.
Yes.
That Daryl's comment.
Daryl,
Just to add
sorry,
to
I'll
that,
ask one more.
Should be, if you're going to make
It's
that
Board of
kind of
Health.
request, it has to be witness testing, because lots of people do testing without having the board of health.
That's a good point. And I think planning board should take that into note, because they would be the ones that would be asking for the testing, so.
Right. Yeah, I would include, my assumption is it has to be witnessed. It's our test, our field. I can make that explicit as part of the motion.
All right, so I think we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion Chuck presented? All those opposed? Votes 3-2. Thank you. All right.
Can I make one?
Oh,
last-
yes, sir, go ahead.
Should I go over there? or-
Yeah, please.
Hey, Daryl Beardsley, and this is with my Board of Health hat on, so as you're moving ahead with what, if you do with getting a contract for the work, certainly like to be involved in with Sean as well to talk about how it's done. I'm thinking that this might also be done in a fairly stepwise procedure, because we do have some data about Jameson Field already. So, right, we know that when the fire station leaching field had to go in, that there wasn't a lot of depth to groundwater there, and hence the mound. So the only other data points are Pine Hills system, but again, that was done long ago. Not all the same kind of information was collected. The design is certainly far from what we do today. And then the most recent pit that was done, but none of that identifying the historical high groundwater level, there was no effort made to do that. So that's just the kind of thing that we also want to make really sure that the health agent is involved with anything that's done on behalf of the town to witness it, and when the health agent does that, they're always working with whoever else is out in the field working on it. So it is a discussion when they're in the field observing features and taking measurements. So.
I think that's why Chuck included the Board of Health as to the plan needs to go through. The planning board's gonna work with you and Sean to get that plan done the way that it should be done.
And that's all.
And it may not use up the whole tent. That's, say, if tests are done carefully, you can pick some spots and get a good sense of where it's heading, and you may not need, and you really don't want to make Swiss cheese out of the field.
Oh,
either.
absolutely not.
It's
Yeah,
not
I wanted to give us some play, $10,000, but I know that John's cheap, so we'll not spend it.
Frugal.
Thank you, Daryl.
He's
All right,
frugal, he's not cheap.
Moving on to the next item on our agenda, the open session ratification of Chief Richard Thompson's employment agreement effective July 1st. I'll take a motion. Well, what do we have to do? I'm sorry,
Just move to, it's already been signed, right?
Yeah, we've already signed it.
So just to announce it.
Oh, it's just announcing that we did, okay, thank you. That we, at our May 9th meeting in executive session, we approved a 3-year contract with Chief Richard Thompson. So,
I would move to enter into the contract with Chief Richard Thompson as police chief for the town of Sherborn pursuant to the contract approved at our executive session on May 9th, 2019.
I'll second.
And already signed by
already
both
signed.
the chief
Right,
and
right,
the
right.
town.
We have to ratify it in public.
right, all right, all those in favor? All right, now to our routine business, the finance director report.
Let's see, our audited financial statements were issued. I would like to propose that in June, on the 20th.
Can you get a little closer to the microphone?
I would like to propose that for the June 20th meeting, Melanson Heath would like to come and present the financial statements
Great.
to the select board. So if you're in agreement with that date, I will reach out.
That'd be perfect,
Okay.
thank you.
Okay, that's it.
That's this
can I ask her a
document, though,
question?
she's
Yeah,
talking about?
that document.
Yes,
We-
yes.
We have a copy of it that you
Okay.
gave us also,
Yeah.
but go ahead, Paul.
So at the end of every year, we do transfers pursuant to a general law that we all fought to get that allows the advisory committee and the Board of Selectmen to adjust accounts. When are we planning to do that?
So we have to do that in the beginning of July.
By July, what's the
By
date?
July 14th, I
14th?
think it has to be
So
completed.
That's the debt, you're gonna
So
wait
that's a
till
very
July?
important date. Well, no.
We have to
well,
wait for the fiscal year to close.
I
on
wait,
June
yeah, I wait to see how everything ends up. I mean, I'm monitoring it very closely and sending out, statements every other week to people and.
Right, the law allows it to be done in May, June, or July. It just has to be done by July 15th.
Yeah.
So we're in a period where we're authorized to do, if there are things that we know we need to get done, should we be doing them? Or
Well,
are you going to
typically-
hold everything until one?
Typically, what we've done all the years I've been on advisory, and last year on the select board, was after the close of the fiscal year, there's some balancing between some budgets that are under, some budgets are over, and then we have a meeting in those first 2 weeks of July with both advisory and the select board to approve any transfers.
So some of my towns some accounts run out of money and they want to finish the year, and so they want to transfer before the end of the year,
Well,
so
I
that they
would- I
have
would
the money
assume- I would
to
assume they would-
finish the year.
We still have money in our reserve account, so I would
Yes, we do.
assume that.
She's been communicating, I don't mean to interrupt, so she sent out probably, you tell me, 4 times or 3 times.
I've seen your
to
emails.
every budget maker saying, it includes reserve fund transfer sheet, blank one, if you need a reserve fund transfer. So she's asking people that have money left to let her know, but she's also telling people that have needs that aren't met and they can't afford to submit a reserve fund transfer request. So she's communicated with every budget
Right.
maker
And I think at this
for
point.
2 months now, I would think. When did you start doing it?
I've seen those emails for the last.
Oh,
3 years.
at the beginning, I send them out every other week now. I
Yeah,
just,
so they're,
it's, yeah.
I think they
And
know.
in big yellow print, it says, if you think you're going to need a reserve fund transfer, please contact me ASAP. So, and we haven't had any requests for any reserve fund transfers yet. I mean, anybody could come to us at any of these meetings, and they haven't yet. So if they're running out of money, I would hope that they would have been talking to Sharon.
Yeah, everybody's paying very close attention.
Well, it's not a good thing, but because the library isn't as far along as we thought, they're turning back probably, it's not final, but around $140,000. Just because, originally and they've already, as you well know, when we did the omnibus budget this year, they reduced the request for fiscal year 20, reflecting the later start date. So
Yeah.
she and I, when we budgeted, when we did do a hot box transfer for CM&D, we looked at, because we want to make sure we had the funds in the reserve fund for that. And we estimated $100,000 for the library turnbacks, and now it's probably going to be in the neighborhood of $140,000.
Yeah, and there's 100 in debt service as well, in the debt service budget, 100,000 there, so
Yeah.
We're in pretty good shape.
we're in good shape, yeah, I feel confident.
Excellent.
Right.
And how much is left in the reserve fund at this point? I think it's
150.
150.
Yeah,
150.
150.
Yeah,
But that part of the issue is, like, a lot of times what we've done in July is we've done police overtime and snow and ice as a reserve fund transfer, but we did those as supplementals this year, so we won't have a large reserve fund transfer reflecting those 2 items, which are 2 that overrun. The only unknown to me, I think, is the legal budget. I'm not sure where we stand with the legal budget. And maybe you guys have a better sense of that. That's the one she and I talked about was a bit of an unknown.
Yeah, we should loop back and get
Yeah,
that
let's-
estimate.
yeah, if we could talk about
Okay.
that, and
okay,
I'd say probably at our next meeting.
Okay.
That'd probably be a
All
good
right.
thing. Because that's, like you said, that's probably the greatest unknown.
Just,
yeah.
The other unknown is the police details, not for the tree cutting, because that was included, but the road work. I don't know if that's going to be over. Is that going to require a reserve fund transfer?
The budget as a whole, man.
Right. But if it's year-end, some of it could be
Yeah.
year-end transfers if we have these large turnbacks from debt service and library.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, snow and ice, because we did the supplemental, was before the last snowstorm.
Right.
So snow and ice is sitting upside down right now, like, we didn't cover it. I mean, it's not still moving, but,
It's-
so
Right.
it's sucked into the normal budget rather than being covered.
Okay. So I think, like we said, we'll talk about legal at the next one, and you can give us an update as to where we think we're at, because we're gonna be pretty close at that point. Then the 20th, we'll meet with Melanson Heath, and then we'll do the first week in July, we'll do any transfers that remain. And I think, in the meantime, if if their budgets are running low, and they think they're gonna need a reserve fund transfer before July, they should bring them to our June meetings.
Yes, that was my point. Thank you.
Okay, I will
good.
definitely
So, all right,
continue communicating that information.
thanks, Sharon.
Okay.
All right, town administrator report?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I wanted to let you know that Gino Carlucci, our town planner, identified a wastewater grant about a week ago and was able to pull it together in the 7 days and submit it. So the grant's been submitted. It's for 50,000 wastewater planning assistance, and it's requires a 25% town match, but he can use his time as in-kind services to count that 25% match. And I just wanted
David, if that gets approved, we can use it for the.
We could use that for the Jameson
You
Field.
kind of counted on that.
we were banking on that.
Okay.
But we still don't have an answer for sure. They won't until they review the grant. We say you can do this and this, but you can't do that.
Okay.
But I just wanted to thank Gino for identifying that and the quick turnaround that he was able to do with extra hours this week.
Okay.
And that's it for the TA report. Oh no, update on the sustainability.
I was just gonna ask you.
I contacted Linsky's office about the earmark that was discussed last time. I still need to touch base again with Caitlin, the chief of state. Okay. And I have a meeting with.
People can't hear you, David.
I have a meeting with Holliston set for next Wednesday. So I don't have sure answers on what's been going on in Holliston until that meeting.
Yeah, and I called the chair yesterday. I've not heard back yet.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I think we talked at the last meeting about maybe setting up a framework for what a job description would look like for us in Sherborn, whatever Holliston does.
Right.
Oh, sorry. Did you get my email? I said someone from the Sherborn Pine Hill Advisory Committee reached out to me and was wondering if this person could, and they're making efforts to make more sustainability and environmental friendly actions over at Pine Hill. Would this person also work there as well, or work in that effort as well? Would it just be non-school?
No. It would include school. Just like our energy committee includes school.
Yeah, they could write
projects.
grants for this. I mean,
70% of our budget. I would like to include, I'd like to include the region also.
Yes, some roofs coming up? maybe?
Yes. So
yeah, with the roof coming up, I know they've both the region and Pine Hill have talked about looking at solar when they redo their roofs.
not only that, so there's things you can get credits for how you dispose of the existing roof.
Right.
So there's credits for if you can have it be repurposed for whatever, asphalt or whatever it is. Dealing with debris from your construction site is actually a big part of it. Sounds counterintuitive, but it's a big piece of it. Can I clarify? Maybe you said I misunderstood Paul earlier. I think when I attended last time, you said the House of Representatives had approved the $50,000 grant, but the Senate hadn't voted yet. Is it now? Have they voted now? To
To
support?
my knowledge,
Not yet.
not on that. No.
Oh, okay. So that should be in the next few weeks, you think?
Right, I did have some conversation with the original sponsors of this was not the Charles River Watershed Association. They felt that they had been confused with the Charles River, so they wanted to make it clear they're a separate group. I don't remember the name of the group, but they were supposed to.
Upper Charles Action, Climate Action.
There you go.
Thank you, Jeff.
Thank you. They sound like the same group, but they're not the same group.
I said that last time too, and I was wrong about that.
I think we get a trademark claim here.
Upper Charles River.
Confusion as to origin.
Upper Charles River Climate Action.
Well, it's not the river. It's
Upper Charles Climate
Action.
Action. Okay, great. Just to have.
CA.
So it has one word in common, and we're
Sounds like King Charles Upper GI tract.
All right. I really don't have
anything new on that.
More answers until
okay.
next one.
Great.
Can I
Thank
just
you.
ask a
Yeah,
question?
go ahead. Can you come up to the microphone? Just because
I wasn't
people
prepared.
people at home.
It's audio only tonight.
Oh, good. So Debbie DeMauro, Hollis Street, Upper Charles Climate Action. Dave talked about working with the schools, and that was, and I'm pretty sure he has a copy of our couple of test runs on a job description, and definitely we want to make sure that the schools are included. It's amazing how they're not teaching anything about the climate. So my understanding is you and Mr. Yon are meeting with Holliston next week?
No, just me.
Just you. Okay, and you said you were going to meet with the chair of the
I
select.
called the chair and have not heard back. I only did it yesterday, so in anticipation of this meeting, so.
Did your homework.
Barely.
Thanks, man. The deadline's coming.
Perhaps instead of calling the chair, you should call the person who sits in the chair.
That'd be Mike Giamo.
So all right, the next item is this. Are you done, David? I'm sorry. Did you have anything
no,
else?
I'm done.
Okay.
Thanks.
Selectmen reports.
The MMA, Massachusetts Selectmen's Association, is putting on a seminar for new selectmen. So I would cordially extend an invitation to our new selectmen. This is a opportunity to learn all about the open meeting law, even though you're a veteran at it, but public records, ethics, they put on a nice show. It's in Sharon, not far away. And we're trying to encourage all newly elected selectmen to go there and get the benefit of the training.
Can you send me the link to the, or?
Sure.
Jeff, I did it several years ago, not as long ago as Paul did, but it was very useful.
Yeah, no, if I'm in town, I'd be glad to do it.
By horse and buggy.
So who's speaking on the open meeting law part of it?
Lauren Goldberg from, and myself.
Yeah, I know. Teasing a little bit.
I knew the answer to the question.
Any other selectmen reports? I know you have. Do you want to talk about Monday? Just to announce.
Oh, just as the Memorial Day ceremony is taking place on Memorial Day this year. At 10 o'clock, we have a
This year,
parade.
they have the high school band
Yeah, the high school
playing
band's
this year.
playing, so.
I don't think I've seen that before. I've been doing it almost as long as you have.
All right, great. Well,
I just wanted to give just one note, kind of appreciation to the garden club, because I think his traffic islands look great.
yeah, I saw them working out there this morning.
Yeah.
I drive past them every day, twice a day, and there's better over the year.
Great. All right, I think if that's it, we have an executive session.
Do we?
If correct me if I'm doing this wrong, because it's my first time doing this, but executive session, MGL Chapter 30A, Section 21A, Subsection 3, to discuss strategy with respect to threatened potential litigation. If an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the litigation position of the town, and the chair so declares, library, and I do so declare, the select board will not return to public session. I need a second and a roll call vote.
Second.
Having a second by Mr. Underpants. And Mr. Johnson. I will now take a roll call vote. Mr. Durensis.
Votes aye.
Mr. Young.
Aye.
Mr. Waldron.
Yes.
It's 2-1 so
Another-
far.
Mr. Johnson.
It's the position. I said
I haven't had the course yet.
I say Mr. Burrell, aye. Having passed by a vote of 5-0, the open session is now closed and we will not be returning to open session. We are now in executive session. Thank you.